Welcome to the Black Girls Heal podcast, where we talk about changing unavailable relationship patterns, healing unresolved trauma, and building a healthy relationship with first you and then others. Every episode, we will talk about actionable advice that you can apply today to break unhealthy patterns and grow your self-worth. I'm Sheena Tubbs. Let's begin. Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Black Girls Heal. So this episode is inspired by the latest episode of the New York Times Presents about the Super Bowl incident. I want to say it's episode 10. I could totally be making that up, but it's the one that talks about the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake Super Bowl incident. Emphasis on putting both names there in the title. And this episode is not about the incident, but about my sadness at a lot of different things, and anger at a lot of different things, but my real sadness in watching Janet Jackson be asked and forced and pressured to apologize so many times for what happened in a way that was unfair, unjust, targeted, and just really being bullied to the place where she got to where she said, I'm not apologizing anymore, and I shouldn't have apologized in the first place for this because it was an accident and it wasn't my fault. And watching that, I just brought to mind all of the times that as a recovering codependent, I apologized for things that were not my fault, that I apologized for things that were really about other people's hurt feelings, that I tried to make myself smaller and not take up space and kind of cower to make other people feel comfortable and to make other people feel as if I was a good team player or a good partner or a good family member, even a good service provider, just because the intimidation of the stronger forces or their stronger personalities or their stronger opinions felt very threatening and felt very scary. And I knew that one way to make it stop was to apologize for what I was doing, who I was, for what they felt like were mistakes, for what they may have been projecting onto me, for things that were unfair, that if I took ownership for it, they wouldn't have to. And I know I have at least two. I know for sure two. I'm not sure if I have more than that, 3 or so. But I know I have at least 2 episodes where I am really, really talking about the importance of apologizing and how important it is for us to initiate and how important it is for us to take ownership of our part and to move forward with that and not wait on someone else for us to clear up our side of the street if there's something that we've done wrong. And I stand by those episodes because I know that there are many of us who do operate in grudges. There are many of us who operate in a place of defensiveness. There are many of us where our healing work is stunted because we're waiting on other people to change instead of looking at ourselves, and it's stopping us from repairing relationships that could be repaired and operating in humility and living in that balance between ego strength and growth. So those episodes have their place. But watching this documentary and noticing my response, I was like, I have not had an episode, at least not of late, where I specifically just talk about how we don't need to apologize for who we are and that we don't need to cower to other people's opinions and projections of us. Let me say before I get into listing the different things that we don't have to apologize for, that it is very normal that there are some areas of our life that we are super, super strong in and super, super differentiated and super, super confident in and boundaried in. That there are absolutely, it's very common for us to have some places and relationships that we're very quick with our nose, that we're very clear with our nose, that we know exactly how to hold a standard and hold expectations, while simultaneously having some relationships in some places that we just feel very weak in, that it is very hard for us to hold our own, that we seem to regress to an earlier place or earlier state, that we feel more sensitive and vulnerable to that felt sense of rejection and abandonment and being liked, that all those things can be true at the same time. And it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't mean that, you're really not confident. It just means that there are some tender places for you to pay more attention to, and that's totally fine. And it's also normal that you can be doing work in these tender places and get to a place of felt confidence and have since an incident happen or a situation happen that you go back to your trigger. You're triggered and you go back to your initial response and you kind of apologize too soon, or take ownership for something that isn't your fault, or acquiesce or try to make nice in a situation where it's probably better for you to hold your own. That happens too. And these are all things that we learn from and we grow from and we move on. And I really want this episode to be a safe place for the women who don't always get it right, for my fellow codependents out there who kind of have some moments where they wish they could have done something differently, but also knowing that every day you're getting better and better, that you're learning more and more, and that you're getting stronger and stronger and clearer on what your standards are, and that your space is sacred and special and to be protected, and your voice and your power is just as important to be seen and valued as anybody else's. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the different things that you don't need to apologize for. The first thing that you don't need to ever apologize for is your no. At any time and in any place, you can say no. You can say no to going to events. You can say no to contributing to something. You can say no to people's requests for money. You can say no to going on dates. You can say no to volunteering for events. You can say no to answering a phone call. You can say no to going into work. You can say no for any and all of these things. You can say no to hanging out with people that you know make you uncomfortable. You are the one who knows you better than anybody else. And if you're not at that place yet, no matter what age you're at, it is very common for women of all ages, from their 20s, their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, to say that they live their whole lives and don't still quite know who they are, especially if they come from a codependent past. You're not alone. But even if that is the case, where you're still trying to figure out what you want and what you like and what makes you happy and what doesn't make you happy, you have a right to say no on your path as you get there. You have a right to say, this works for me and this doesn't work for me. Or I don't know how I feel about that, so for now I'm just going to say no. And other people's responses to that, other people's judgments of that is their own. As codependents, we will spend our whole lives running in circles, trying to make people proud, trying to change the opinions, especially if we can feel that their opinions of us may be a little bit fragile or may be lower than we want it to be, or lower than who we believe that we are, or how we're presenting ourselves. We can spend our whole lives just trying to make up for this felt sense of deficit that we're operating from in certain people's eyes. And then find out at the end that it didn't matter anyways, that people are going to believe what they want to believe about you. And I know we hear that, but for those of us, especially if we grew up in settings where we were successful and trying to get people to be nice to us by us, being the smart person or the good person or the funny person or the pretty person or whatever bag of tricks we pulled out, the successful person, the talented person, whatever mechanisms we created as little girls, we can hear someone say, there are going to be some people who don't like you, and there are going to be some people who just have judgments about you, and it's impossible for you to fix it if that's what they choose to believe. We can hear that and not believe it. We cannot believe it and kind of take it as a challenge to say, well, watch this. I can convert anybody to liking me. And I would just ask you to consider, why would you want to? Why would you want to spend hours and energy and time in your life focused on people who don't love you? Focus on people who are committed to looking at you negatively. Focus on people who will assume the worst of you and then blame you for their opinion of you. Why would you want to focus on that instead of focusing on people and relationships and in settings that actually want you to succeed, that already see you shining, that already see you as amazing, and invest in those? It can be very hard for us to tolerate that discomfort because it feels dangerous to us. It feels wrong to us. It feels like evidence that there is something wrong with us. But honey, there's nothing wrong with you at all. And that doesn't mean that there needs to be something wrong with them as well. It's absolutely possible that there is a lovely person in the world who's super amazing, that you're just not their cup of tea. And you can be two simultaneously amazing people who live in this world who just don't click and connect. And that's okay. And if you want to learn side skills related to building relationships or building communication just for yourself as a person, then do that. But don't do it for somebody else. You need to do that for yourself. The second thing that we don't have to apologize for is taking up space, for owning our body, for owning our voice, for saying what we want to say, for showing up how we want to show up, for our voice to be as loud or as quiet as we want it to be, for our clothes to be as loud or as mild as we want them to be, for our opinions to be as loud or as moderate as we want them to be. I think as recovering codependents, one thing that we have to learn how to do is break out of the mold of who people want us to be and think we should be and tell us to be, and also the mold that we have told ourselves that we have to be as well. And oftentimes that mold is a very direct replicate or very similar to the image that other people have put onto us or that society has put onto us. But our freedom comes from us learning how to step into exactly who we are. So growing up in the hood and then realizing, you know what, I'm actually really interested in contemporary art and nobody else around me is really interested in that. I don't really have anybody to talk to about that, but I'm not going to hide that and I'm going to go and find my people. Growing up in middle class America or an immigrant home, which is the experience of so many women who are in our community, where you only have three choices to be a doctor, a lawyer, or engineer, or maybe a pharmacist, if you're going to get spicy. But those are your only career choices, and going through that experience and having all of that, those expectations, and then deciding, you know what, my passion is cooking and being a chef, and I'm going to open a restaurant and I'm going to be successful there. Our freedom comes with us digging deep down and figuring out what is it that I was brought into this world to do. And how do I do that with excellence? And how do I do that with passion and drive? Because what I was brought into this world to do is something that other people cannot do. And for me to shine with that. Janet has transformed and transfixed generations because of how she had the courage to step out and own her beauty, own her sexuality, own her voice, own her talent in multiple ways, right? Versus staying in that cookie cutter mold, that blueprint that was laid out for her. Her stepping into who she was has benefited all of us. And it's the same for you. It's the same for you, no matter how small or insignificant that you feel like your contribution to the world is, it's not. Whether you are fantastic at creating things out of yarn, or you are super good at budgeting, or you have a voice that won't quit, or you're super great at telling stories, or you can walk into a room and just see the beauty in it and bring it out in the space. Or you're so great at teaching concepts and breaking things down to people, and they're always telling you that, and you just play it off because with all of these things, we just feel like, oh, people are just being nice. They're just complimenting me. They're just saying that because they like me, because they're my friend. No, they are saying that because these are things that you are uniquely gifted in. That is not as easy as you think it is. That is not as natural as what it feels like to you. And so things that you have been specifically gifted and talented in this world are the things that you should be showing off. Those are the things that you should be showing up in. Those are the things that you should be sharing in the world unapologetically. We need people who can walk into spaces and transform them for us. Those of us who live in places that we wish were a little bit prettier, or we walk into places, or have you ever walked into like a doctor's office or a place that's supposed to be a place for healing or comfort, and you're like, damn, like this is drab. Like this is depressing. I remember when I was looking for schools for my son, daycares for my son, and I didn't care how good the reviews were. If I walked into a space that just didn't have good energy and just didn't look visually appealing, we weren't staying there. Like, there's giftings in all of these things that may be natural to you. And so you have the right to show up as you are and to take up space and also to protect your space. One thing that's a common recurring theme with the students that I serve is social media and its impact on them and being connected to people who may be draining to them, connected to family members or toxic friend groups or exes or coworkers or people that they actually don't want to be connected to, but the politics of social media and the spoken and the unspoken rules that we have all learned and lived by over the last decade or so about what it means to unfriend or to follow or not follow or to watch stories but not comment, or just all of the things that happen with social media, and trying to figure out, well, what do I do there? Like, I might be eliminating time with them in real life, but we're still connected on social media, and this is still triggering me, and this is still hurtful. And having to learn that social media is also part of your physical space. If you have found that you have to take literal physical space in real life from people because of the toxicity and because of the emotional pain and because of the mental mind games and the intimidation and the bullying that happens, even as grown-up adults, if you have found that you have to take that space as an adult in real life, then you're in your full right to make that space online as well. And their experience of that is their own experience. And of course, we can talk about conversations and what that looks like for you and those relationships more, but you have the right to take that space as well there. It is still your space. Shout out to Tom and everybody else who's old enough to actually remember being on MySpace and having a MySpace page. The next thing I want to share that you don't need to apologize for, which is absolutely related to the inspiration for this episode, which is things that are not your fault. You do not need to apologize for things that are not your fault, things that you did not do, things that you did not create, or things that were accidents. Once again, for those of us who grew up in homes where the emotional affection was so fragile and so conditional and so predicated on whether or not we were making the adults or caretakers in our households happy or satisfied, or whether or not they were having a good day, or whether or not someone was being abused, and we had the responsibility of deflecting the attention, or so there's so many combinations that have happened for many of us, so many ways that our trauma has presented. It can be an auto reflex for us to immediately apologize for things that are not our fault. So someone is having a bad day, it has nothing to do with us, and we're like, I am so sorry. How can I make this better for you? We are seeing that someone is struggling with boundaries, and we've told them no, or we set limits, or we have ended the relationship, and we feel bad, we feel guilty, so we try to find a way to make up for it and to give in and to give them something to soften the blow, instead of the no being no and the limit being the limit. They are uncomfortable with how we show up boldly as ourselves, and so we will auto flex and try to dim down or water down and diminish ourselves to try to make them feel comfortable. And I'm going to say this again as a fellow codependent, speaking primarily to my codependents or my people who are pretty strong in most areas of your life, pretty confident, but there are some areas that you find that you are codependent in. I want to speak to you and say that if this has been you and you have found that you have auto flexed to over apologizing and taking ownership for things that weren't your fault, or going along with things that really made you uncomfortable and you didn't realize it until later on, that was an opportunity for you to say no or for you to stand up for yourself, I want you to know that it's okay. It's okay. It's okay because you didn't know. It's okay because your body and your mind were just responding in the way that it's been trained to respond your whole life, to keep you safe, to keep you secure, to keep you whole, to keep you protected. And your body and your mind were just doing what it knew to do. And it's good that you're at a place now with self-reflection that you can look at and say, oh, you know what? That auto response may have helped me in the past, but I think going forward, I want to do things differently. And the blessing and your gifting and your strength is in that awareness. You are not as far behind as you may think that you are just because you impulsively or reflexively said, I'm sorry, or you gave in, or you went along with something in a moment that you wish you didn't. The strength is in the fact that you realize that no longer works for you. And now you're going to be super aware going forward to do things differently. So I really encourage you to forgive yourself, to be kind to yourself, to talk to a loved one, a friend, a family member, a therapist, or someone who can really encourage you where you are, that you're okay and that is okay. Everybody makes mistakes, and sometimes you'll talk to these people. You'll talk to your friend or a loved one or your therapist, and they will help you see that it wasn't even that big of a deal. A lot of times we can be harder on ourselves than anybody else is, and we can really make something a big deal that's not even an issue at all, because we're so used to criticizing ourselves, because we're so used to seeing ourselves at a deficit. And it's by your continued work in your self-love and your healing and your growth that you will move forward, that you will make some changes. Those of you who have taken our You Are Worthy course, you've seen us talk about that. You've seen us talk about how it really is those threads of childhood emotional neglect and insecurity and the other types of trauma that have really impacted how we see ourselves. And it really is about how we talk to ourselves and practicing that self-acceptance that's going to help us move forward to feeling worthy. And as you feel more worthy, that's how you are going to show up differently in these relationships. That's what's going to help you immediately gut check. I don't like how this makes me feel, and I deserve to feel better, right? And so just continue to do that worthiness work, and it's going to help you with those boundaries. And here's a last bonus one for you, which is if you do find that you have to apologize for something because it is something that would be helpful and needed for you to take ownership of, for you to be in your integrity, to initiate it, to make that step and apologize for your part in something, do not feel pressured to have to keep apologizing over and over and over again, especially if those apologies are being used as a way to humiliate you, to villainize you, to victimize you, to demean you. This happens often in narcissistic relationships, whether the narcissist is your mother or your sister or a partner, requiring you and asking you to apologize over and over and over again. Is never enough apologies that you can give. There's never enough contrition that is acceptable to them, and they're going to keep reminding you to make you feel like crap and maintain the power. This happens in relationships where you're scapegoated, where you're the black sheep, where it doesn't matter how much you apologize or how much you try to show up differently. Going back to how I started this episode, they have this image of you that is how they're always going to see you. And it's up to them to want to change that perception. It has nothing to do with you. So no matter what the situation or the scenario, or there is a racist organization, or it's a place that's just hell bent on making you pay for something that is not your responsibility to pay for. But going back to what I was about to say, no matter what the scenario is or situation is, your one apology is enough. It is enough to say your part and let people do with that what they will. What I have just noticed is that sometimes people are just out for blood. They are just out for blood for their own entertainment, because they may be miserable themselves, because there's a mob mentality, because people forget that you're human, or because they're just abusive persons, like I said in my examples. And no matter where they're coming from, that is for them to deal with. And you need to focus on keeping yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, financially, sexually safe. And you're the only one who can do that. You're the one who's in charge of that. So that's it for today's episode. I hope that you found it helpful. I hope that my fellow codependents found it validating to your experience. And I hope that it helps you move forward differently and or forgive yourself for ways that you may have apologized too prematurely, or apologized too much, or apologized accidentally in the past. If you are wanting to participate in our You Are Worthy course, it is now part of our Recovery School membership. So you can get started on that immediately. I bundled a whole bunch of our courses together in one place for women to go ahead and get started. This is different than my main programs. These are smaller memberships so that you can get access to these resources related to building your self-worth and building your self-esteem and improving your boundaries and even getting started breaking your patterns of love addiction as well. So you can learn more and get started by going to therecoveryschool.com, which will redirect you there, or just go to our main website, blackgirlsheal.org, and checking us out there. So that is it for now. I hope that you have a wonderful week. I hope that you take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Hey, so thanks for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoy what you learned today, it doesn't have to stop here. Check out the Black Girls Heal website at blackgirlsheal.org for more resources to help you heal from intimacy disorders like love addiction and love avoidance. The best time to start or restart your healing journey is now. You can grab a free copy of our 5-step roadmap to heal love addiction, love avoidance, and love deprivation by going to blackgirlsheal.org/roadmap. And if you're on social media, feel free to follow us at Black Girls Heal on Instagram and Facebook.